Yeah.
Well, I'm probably the least important person in this deal, so don't worry about that. I'm going to go ahead now, and Gerson, you can go ahead and start the screen share from your side, and then you can walk through your presentation, and then we'll continue on from there.
All right, guys. So you guys ready to party?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I apologize. I had a couple things going on this week, but including being sick, but I don't have the virus. I promise. You guys see the screen?
Yeah.
We can. And Gerson, if you go down towards the lower right-hand corner, you're going to see a thing that looks like a screen, the right-hand corner. Right, not left. So go down towards the little lower right-hand corner. You're going to see a little thing that looks like a screen on a stand, and you want to click on that in order to work your presentation.
Or you could do this.
Or you can do that.
Yeah.
Either way.
All right. So yeah, I didn't have much time to prepare this, but you guys are welcome to ask questions or interrupt as much as you want, honestly, to help me out a little bit. But yeah, so my presentation is on the blue sky valuation multiple. And so the blue sky multiple is used on companies that have meaningful net tangible assets, for example, car dealerships or real estate firms. Okay. So basically, in addition to the multiple that you find on that specific, like just going through the whole multiple situation in which you find a multiple that suits the company that you have, you're gonna add some kind of a premium to the company because this company is different than the others. And that's basically what I wrote here is it sums up to the multiple in addition to a premium paid for that type of business. This is equal to this premium is basically added to the company based on multiple factors. And I'm gonna go through some of the factors here. One being that the company has a lot of tangible assets, and just like a lot of like car dealerships, they have a lot of cars on the lot that they have to account for. So that in itself has to be accounted for, aside from just some EBITDA or a revenues multiple. That has to be accounted for separately. So some of the factors that you have to account for in order to add this premium to the multiple is earning growth expectations. Below market expectations often commands a higher blue sky multiple because buyers believe that they can grow profits at an above average rate by reducing expenses or increasing gross profit or gross sales. Yeah, basically like paying low, giving a low number or a low multiple, and giving a premium, expecting to get that in return, get the ROI for that. Dealerships in high growth markets, basically like dealerships in areas such as big cities, they tend to sell more cars because of there's more people, inventory. how much inventory does the company have, the value minus the debt, and brand. Basically, a brand such as Mercedes-Benz is going to have a higher multiple than a brand such as Ford, because you're selling higher value inventory. And then this is one of the examples I had. And I know Rick, he has an example for us too. And I don't know if she has an example for us too, but a real estate investment company has an enterprise value of 120. This is based on an EBITDA multiple EBITDA of 12 with a multiple of 10. It has 200 in assets and 100 in liabilities. If you have 200 in assets and 100 in liabilities, you can assume that the blue sky multiple is 220. And the way that I came up with that was the assets minus the liabilities, which equals 100, plus the EV, the multiple that we came up with. So you add it on to the multiple itself. So that's the example that I have for you guys.
So, Gerson, I think that in your last bullet point where you referenced that this has a blue sky multiple of 220, I think what you really mean to say is that this company has goodwill, which is sometimes referred to as blue sky, of 220, not a blue sky multiple of 220. So, and if we make that change here, the one you said makes sense to me. I am going to walk through another example on this that will help you guys go point by point on it. So if you will, I'm going to stop your screen sharing, Britton, and I'm going to, or rather, Gerson, I'm going to stop your screen sharing. I'm going to pick up my own. So bear with me here. Are you all now able to see my screen with a blue sky valuation on it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me walk through mine. And Kira, if you would pipe in here, I'm asking Kira to pipe in not only because she's had some experience here, but you'll see that Kira helped create this presentation. In fact, Ryan, Francesca, Kira, Cole, and Tim were one of the valuation teams that went to Atlanta this last November, and they needed to use a blue sky model and a blue sky multiple because they were valuing a car dealership or a Larry Miller kind of grouping of car dealerships. So the blue sky multiple is most commonly thought of as a way to look at valuing an automobile dealership. And it begs a couple of questions. One is, how do you do it? And two is, where do you find the multiple you're going to use? So let's first address how we're going to find the multiple that we'll use, and then I'll talk about how we use the multiple in coming up with a value. So first, you're going to find the multiple through one of a variety of sources. Either the Kerrigan report or the Hague report are the two most common sources that are used for this. And those are publications, not unlike PitchBook and DealStats, that publish blue sky valuation multiples for automobile dealers and dealerships. And so you would find the multiple from there. And for the most part, the multiple is going to be based upon what brand or manufacturer of automobile your dealerships are selling. In the case of a Larry Miller style dealership, where you have numerous brands and numerous properties and numerous manufacturers, then you might have to amalgamate or do a weighted average of some kind of the blue sky multiple as you would find them published in the Hague report or the Kerrigan report. Just because blue sky is typically talked about and used for automobile dealerships doesn't mean that it's exclusively used for that. You're going to find blue sky multiple and blue sky model type valuations for any kind of a company that has significant dollars in inventories, that have high market values, and sometimes significant dollars tied up in real estate. If you think about it, a automobile dealership probably is going to own its own real estate. Why is that? Any ideas at all? Well, think about it.
Question again, you broke up for a minute.
Oh, sorry about that. I said an automobile dealership is going to own its own real estate. Why is that?
They probably get to write it off to a certain aspect, I would think, as if it was like if you think about a small business, how you can write off a room of your house that you do all your work out of. Is it the same kind of idea with a car dealership? If they own the land, there's some sort of tax incentive there?
Well, just like any business, if you own the building, you're able to write off maintenance, repairs, insurance, taxes, other expenses associated with the building, and you're able to write off interest expense on any mortgaging or loan you've got associated with the building. So that's true, but that's true for any business.
Right.
Think about an automobile dealership compared to an office building. So if I've got an office building down here near the corner of 106 South and I-15, 7-story office building, Class A space, it cost me $65 million maybe, so it's a beautiful building. I can put almost any kind of business in those offices, right? Oh, probably not one that uses a big production or manufacturing or has hazardous chemical, but there is a seemingly endless array of businesses that I could put inside of those offices in that building. Some small, some large, and some combination of it. But if I happen to own a piece of property on which an automobile dealer exists, so lots of parking spaces, a significant service area where you've got a dozen service bays and the lifts and the oil pits and all of these things. I've got a paint department, and we've got the hazmat stuff built into this. And then I've got these little cubicles and a great big display space. How many different kinds of businesses can I put into that physical space? Well, pretty much only big inventory dealerships, right? Pretty much only automobile dealerships are going to want that space. So most auto dealers own their own space because it's rare for an investor to want to buy the facility that an auto dealer would exist in to rent it out to an auto dealer, because there's going to be so few of them that would be vying for that space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, auto dealers tend to be able to have great financing options available to them. We hope you're relaxing really comfortably there, Gerson. It looks like you've kind of settled back into the sofa there and you're having a good time. You and Griffin get the award today for being the most chill, okay? So most auto dealers are going to own their own facility, which means all of a sudden we now know that they don't fit within the mold that most other businesses fit within as we're valuing them. Normally, a business doesn't own its own real estate, or at least not under the name of the business. Maybe somebody else associated with it owns the real estate. And most of the time, the business is going to rent the real estate. So in order to think about the value of the business, we have to think about its value based upon our normal DCF or multiple construction. But then we've got to add the market value of this real estate to it, which makes it a little bit different. In the case of a dealership, and specifically an auto dealer or any dealership that has a significant inventory of high dollar products, any type of business like that has to be thought of a little differently than some of the businesses we've considered, because not only is there the tangible value of the real estate, but there's a tangible value of this extraordinarily high inventory. So that's a kind of a generalization. That might be a tractor dealer. It might be a company that sells great big computer servers for the cloud. It might be all kinds of different companies where they have a significant investment in high value inventories. So let's walk through how we look at this at the moment for an auto dealer. So we're going to be coming up with a market value. We have to have the market value of the real estate. We have to have the value of the current inventory. We're going to be looking at the intangible assets value. We're going to take a pre-tax multiple, which is different. We've always looked at tax-adjusted multiples, right? Because we've looked at when we dealt with these market multiples, and then we're going to recognize that those multiples vary year by year and manufacturer by manufacturer, and we're probably going to find them through the Hague report or the Kerrigan report. So the inputs are going to be the net tangible asset value, and that will be the value of the tangible assets. That would be the real estate and any of this high dollar inventory, minus the liabilities. Well, any liabilities in this case are going to be long-term debt against which the real estate, etc., has been collateralized. But also, in the case of an auto dealer, if we've got Kira Enterprises here and she sells Mercedes down in South Jordan, she's got 100 different Mercedes sitting on the lot, and they've probably got a retail value of $150,000, $180,000 average each. Well, that's a lot of money. I don't know about Kira, but that's a lot to me. And so she's got to think about, how is she keeping them there? Well, she's financing them. She's not going out to a bank and financing them, but the manufacturer extends financing to the dealer in something called flooring. So when you hear the term flooring is essentially an account receivable issued to, or credit issued to the business owner that is collateralized by the inventory, and for which the terms are different than typical accounts receivable. It's typically not a 30 or 60 or 90-day deal. They typically are able to keep that flooring until such time as they sell the inventory. So the manufacturer finances this for them, and they pay interest on it. So again, that's different than you find in a basic account receivable scenario. But we're going to take the real estate as a tangible asset. We're going to take any of this high value inventory as a tangible asset, and we're going to subtract from that all of the long-term capital debt and any of the flooring expense or the financing expense or dollar value against the actual inventory itself. And that becomes the net tangible asset. Don't worry about this commentary here with respect to LIFO reserve. That was something specific to this case. You're going to see a couple of numbers here that have to do with this case as well. But we'll take the net tangible asset value, and we're going to add that to what's thought of as an intangible value, which is simply the blue sky multiple applied to some normalized pre-tax earnings. So think about the right-hand side here as though it's simply some multiple value that we've come up with for the company. And the left-hand side as being an adjustment to that, to recognize that we're not just getting the business, we're getting some real estate or other highly valued tangible assets along with it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pass through this slide. So in fact, I'm gonna move right to an example that I had put together for us. So I'm gonna give you two examples, and one's an auto dealer, and then the next one is not an auto dealer, but using the same concept. Okay. So here I've simply repeated the equation. So the valuation we're going to come up with is using the adjusted pre-tax earnings times this blue sky multiple. And again, we've gotten that blue sky multiple from either the Hague report, the Kerrigan report, or some other repository. And then we're going to add to it the net tangible assets. So let's assume in this company we're looking at, we've got $3.5 million of earnings. We've got a $500,000 adjustment that's got to go against them. We've got a blue sky multiple we found through one of the services of 5. There's real estate owned at 17 million, mortgages at 10, inventory at 14. And then this claims against inventory would be any financing against the inventory of 13.5 million. So to put together the equation, I'm going to take the 3.5 of earnings minus the 5 adjustments. That's going to end up with 3. I'm going to multiply that by the multiple. That's going to give me 15. I'm going to add that then to 7, which is the net asset value of the real estate. So the tangible value of the real estate minus the mortgage. So 15 plus 7. And then I'm going to add to it 0.5, which is the difference between the inventory and the claims against the inventory. So 15, 7, and 5. I've got a total valuation using the blue sky multiple and this method of 22.5 million. Pretty straightforward, right?
Yep.
And you can see that the only thing that's unusual at all about this is that the blue sky multiple is a multiple that is found not just from looking at other companies, but looking at dealerships specifically and looking at the manufacturer that they're representing and selling for. So in this case, this blue sky multiple wasn't a multiple based upon Cura's auto dealership expressly. It was a multiple essentially based upon the type of automobile Cura is selling. I'll go back up to this particular slide, and this shows some different multiples based on some different manufacturers. Here, the BMW manufacturer was almost all the way out at a 7 times multiple. Mercedes looks about a 6.8. Audi was a multiple of about 5.6. Jag, Lincoln, Volvo, Land Rover, Acura, Infiniti were coming in at just under 4. And the reason that these manufacturers are on here and others are not is that these were the manufacturers that were in the case that this was initially developed for. But you're going to find that Ford and Chevy and Chrysler are going to be in here in the high 4s to low 5s. You might try to generalize and say that the luxury manufacturers are here in the upper echelons and those that are not luxury are down here lower, but you see that's not the case. I mean, Jag, Land Rover, those are luxury brands, of course. Lincoln is too, right? But so it doesn't mean, luxury doesn't mean high multiple, and consumer grade doesn't mean low multiple. This is much more telling based upon how popular the manufacturer is, how much of a profit is able to be extracted when you're selling one type of vehicle versus another and such. Let's use that same example now that I just gave that ended in 22.5. And now let's think about this with respect to using the same concept, but for a company that's not a dealership. So again, we're going to take an adjusted EBIT and we're going to take it against a multiple, and we're going to add the tangible assets. So here I've got the adjusted EBIT, or my EBIT of 3.5, the adjustments of 0.5, and I've got a tax rate of 26%. I'm saying we've got an EBIT multiple of 6.5, and then the real estate owned of 17, mortgage of 10, inventory of 14, and claims against the inventory of 13.5. So the exact same scenario, except for I would have found this EBIT multiple using something like Deal Stats, PitchBook, one of the ways that we normally do it, because this is not an auto dealership. Now, I actually realized when I was putting this together quickly this morning, I have an error in it. So it'll be interesting to see if any of you can pick up my error. I saw it immediately. So as I try to value this, I'm going to take my EBIT. I'm going to adjust it so I'm back to 3. I'm going to multiply it here as I'm showing by 1 minus the tax rate. And then I'm going to take that number and multiply it by 6.5. That's essentially giving us the value of the asset based upon its multiple rather than having value based upon a discounted cash flow. Okay? And now I'm going to take the net tangible assets, which is the same as we saw before. And this leads me to a 21.93 value, or 21.93 million. Anybody here see my error?
is it that we have tax included? Because I thought we were getting a pre-tax.
Yeah, well, the pre-tax
Or is that just for auto dealers?
Well, that's a good question. So on the auto dealer, the blue sky multiple is a pre-tax multiple. So when you're an auto dealer, the blue sky multiple simply is a pre-tax multiple. But I've applied taxes to an EBIT multiple. Is an EBIT multiple also a pre-tax multiple?
Yeah.
Of course it is. And I would like to tell you that I did this for the learning experience here. I didn't. I did it because I was doing it quickly and I screwed it up. Okay. So I should not have made this adjustment here. So I'm going to correct this before I put it up on Canvas. But I will put it up on Canvas for you. But the next slide, as we now take this a step or two further, I'm going to use the same 21.93 million. So I just don't want to adjust the number on the fly. Okay. So now we see that you can use the same method, but for a non-auto dealer. It's just that we don't go to a blue sky report of some kind to find the multiple. We find the multiple the same way we always find multiples. And we choose to use an EBIT multiple, or maybe we choose to use an EBITDA multiple, or we use a free cash flow multiple. It doesn't matter. When you're valuing some other asset-intensive business, you don't have to use the blue sky multiple. In fact, you probably can't. You use whatever multiple you believe fits properly for the situation that the company happens to be in. And again, it's going to come up with our total valuation. Okay. So now let's think about how this affects the equity value, which won't surprise you at all. But then we'll look at thinking about correlating that with the balance sheet. So in this case, we're going to find equity valuation the same way we always find it. We've calculated enterprise value when we came up with this number, right? And we recognize that enterprise value is equal to equity plus debt minus cash. But in the case of most small, moderate-sized businesses, we're going to recognize and assume that there is no excess cash in the balance sheet. So we won't even deal with cash. So that means equity or enterprise value is going to be equal to equity plus debt. Or we can rearrange that and say that equity is going to be equal to enterprise value minus debt. And that's exactly what I've done when I come down here to equity being equal to 11.93. So now we know the equity, and if we know the number of shares outstanding, we know the dollar value per equity share, right? That's exactly as we would have done it otherwise. We're just going to kill this and see what happens to us. If we go on, now let's think about this a little bit differently. I want to think about if I buy this company and I pay 21.93 for it, of which 11.93 was equity, how's that going to look on my balance sheet? Because am I going to put it on my balance sheet for the dollar amount I paid for it? Or am I going to put its assets on my balance sheet, and am I going to put some dollar value of goodwill on the balance sheet as well? Well, I'm going to put its assets on the balance sheet for whatever their existing market value is, and I'm going to put then the value of goodwill on the balance sheet. And so to figure out how I do this, I have to remember that the owner's equity equals assets plus goodwill minus debt. Another way of thinking about that is assets plus assets minus debt, assets equal owner's equity plus debt. But this whole goodwill's got to end up in here somewhere, and it ends up as an asset. So what I'm really saying is tangible assets plus intangible assets are equal to owner's equity plus debt. I've simply rearranged the equation here and say that owner's equity equals asset plus goodwill minus the debt. And now I've applied the numbers. And when I work through these numbers, I realized the goodwill in this case was equal to 4.3. I took the calculated value, excuse me, I took the calculated value of equity, I subtracted from it the asset values, I added to that the debt values, and that's how it's giving me this 4.3 value for goodwill. And then I went ahead and just made sure that my equation worked, that the left-hand side balanced out the right-hand side. Any question about how I've done this? So the blue sky model and the blue sky multiple, even though they're used primarily for auto dealerships, they can be used for any asset intensive business. It's just that when you use them for an auto dealership, you have a place where you can go to find what the multiple should be. When you use them for any other asset intensive business, you don't have such a narrowly defined place to find out what the multiple should be. You're going to find it the same way we found it using whether it's deal stats or PitchBook or some other repository. And you can have various types of multiples to choose from, whereas using the blue, you simply have the blue multiple. It helps us find not only a value of the company, but it also can be used for us to find the value of the equity, just like any valuation can, and for us to think about the value of goodwill that as we put this asset that we've acquired onto our balance sheet. Okay. What are your thoughts or what are questions or comments?
So for a company like Amazon Web Services, where they have like a super asset intensive business with a bunch of server space and all that kind of stuff, would you say the blue sky is the best way to value a company like that, or is it still a DCF or just typical multiple approach?
Yeah, so I would say that it's an adjusted multiples approach. We call this blue sky, right? But the reality is we're simply taking some multiples or some DCF valuation and adding to it some net tangible asset value, because the blues or the DCF or the multiples based approach valued the operation. We now have to give more value to this asset, this company, because it also owns some highly valuable real estate or highly valuable other assets like server farms and such. Remember that when we value a company, we're typically not thinking about it as having real estate, because most companies don't need to own real estate. Those that do own real estate, though, sometimes have the real estate owned inside the company and sometimes outside the company. So I might own a business and it's in an office building and I own the office building. Well, I probably own the office building separately from the business. And if I want to know the value of the office building, I have somebody in real estate tell me what the value of the office building is. I want to know the value of the business, I go to Griffin or Pat and say, tell me what the value of the business is. And together, those are the value of the things that I own. But if I happen to own them in the same envelope, the same package, then I do the same thing. I just add it together and I call that the value of whatever that structure of that package is. And in this case, we've got a blue sky multiple that's exclusively for dealerships, whereas in all other company cases, we would use either a DCF or some other multiple that we would find some other way. Okay, so let's talk briefly about how we move on for the next few weeks. Next week, we're supposed to be with Economic Partners, and we're due to visit with them at 10:30. I reached out to them a couple of days ago and gave them the option of either moving that meeting to another date or having us have a virtual meeting. They're very comfortable with Zoom already. It's the platform that they prefer to use, and so they're going to be inviting us in through Zoom. And so we'll still have our meeting with them. It'll be at 10:30. It's going to be virtually the exact same experience we would have had otherwise. It's just going to be digital and virtual rather than face-to-face. I'm going to ask you to make sure that you have dressed professionally, even though you're going to be sitting in your own offices, and I don't know how they're going to be dressed, but some of you are interviewing with this company and others of you would like to interview with this company. I will have delivered to them in advance of our meeting a portfolio that has all of your resumes in it. And so as we're presenting ourselves to them, I want you to present yourselves professionally. I'll send you the invitation on this. And I expect that that's probably the entirety of our class for next week, because that was going to be the entirety including travel time. Our travel time now is less, right? In fact, it's how you go from wherever you eat or sleep to how you go to wherever you're doing the taping of this or the recording of this. And in Gerson's case, I think he eats, sleeps, and tapes all in the same place. At least that's what it looks like. And I'm pretty sure that that's your pillow in back of your head, isn't it, Griffin?
This is not my bed. This is my living room.
Oh, yeah, but Griffin, that looks like your pillow. You sleep with that, don't you? Yeah, you dog. No. You can't do that. We're envious. We're putting you down, brother. We're envious of you. Okay. So as we have these company visits over the next several weeks, we're probably going to have them virtually. The next one we'll have is with Scalar. That's some weeks out still. But unless something has changed, we'll have that virtually as well. But the rest of our assignments, we should be able to roll through just as we would have otherwise. And then we're going to have to figure out how we'll execute the final presentations. I haven't quite decided that yet. Okay, anything else that you have for me?
Nope.
Okay. Well, guys, I appreciate being with you. I hope that you don't allow the uncertainties that we're dealing with to be unnecessarily upsetting to you. This is an interesting time that you're living through. I've never had this kind of experience. I don't know of anyone alive that has. The last time we had anything like this within our society was in, I think it was the 1920s during the Spanish flu. And very few people would have any recollection of that, if anyone. And so this is something you're going to tell your grandchildren about. And it will probably flavor how you deal with uncertainty in the future. Just make sure you do it as champions, okay?
All right.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Have a good day.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. You too.
Bye.